Welcome to the Creative Women's Roundtable. Even though we don't officially have a table, but that's cool. And not enough chairs, but they're getting me one. How's everybody doing? Yay! So a couple of rules before we begin. No recording. I know we all have our phones, and that's super cool, but we don't want you to record with your phone. We're recording it with a nice camera, so you'll be able to check it out on YouTube. So instead of having your phone up here, that way you get to be in the moment and just enjoy right now. Isn't that cool? Yes. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, we will be taking questions too. Make sure you're not calling them out, just like in school again. You know, you raise your hand, and if we call on you, you can ask your question. And we'll keep it limited to like creative questions because we're talking about women who are creative. So speaking of which, so I'm Lisa Corrao. Some of you know me. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm here doing the comedy show. So hi, everybody. And let's meet the rest of the people on our panel. Hi, guys.
Hi. What up? What up?
Is the switch on? Try this switch. There you go. No? Here.
What? Bye. Where's her chair? Why are you giving me? You're next. Wait, can she have that chair so she doesn't have to?
Check 1 2.
It's broken.
Check 1 2.
Okay. Well, you.
1 1 check
Okay.
1 2, check
Here, you go first because you're there.
I feel like it was set up, so I'm forced to be first.
1 2 1 2
Well, my name is Emi Lenox, and I am a comic writer and
1
artist.
2.
I guess I'm known for Plutona, which I co-wrote with Jeff Lemire. And most recently, I did a one-shot with Black Hammer and Jeff Lemire again, because he's a bud, called Casilla Louise. We were actually nominated for an Eisner, but alas, we lost to Chip Zdarsky and Spider-Man. But, you know, it's Spider-Man. Everyone loves Spider-Man. I get it. And I'm also known for drawing cute cats.
Why didn't you leave with that? Hello. This one's subtle. That one's not subtle. This one's subtle. That one's not subtle. This one's subtle. That one's not subtle. Hi, everybody. What's up? My name's Felicia Day. You may know me from my acting work. I've been on shows like Supernatural and Magicians and Mystery Science 3000. Oh, someone's carrying a Mystery Science 3000. Good choice, sir. Carry that album everywhere with. Yeah. Okay. I've done a lot of web things. I created The Guild, which is a web series. Thank you very much. I also had a company called Geek and Sundry where we made awesome shows like Tabletop and Critical Role and things like that. And I wrote a memoir called You Never Weird on the Internet Almost. And I have a new book coming out called Embrace Your Weird, which is coming out on October 1st. FeliciaDayBook.com. Please pre-order. Yay. Does yours work? Oh, subtle.
Is it working? Is that working? This isn't working. This is working.
These don't work.
Yeah, like not at all.
It will not.
I think it actually does if you go like this. Would anyone like to do ASMR? You can knit and purl a little bit.
Okay, I'm going to try. This is working. Yay. Okay, so now I get to follow up a giant resume girl here.
Sorry. I'm
so
sorry.
My creativity has been in different ways. So I was a hairdresser for 17 years, and then I wanted to do something new, and so I wrote a children's book, and which I have with me here.
Very good.
Yay, I know, and your daughter, it was hilarious.
With it.
Well,
Obsessed.
she sends me a video. How old was she, like not even a year old?
Not even a year old, no.
And she is just whipping through the pages. I'm like, see, this is why I made thick pages with sewn binding, because an 8-month-old kid can tear through it and it still survived. It was great.
Surviving, it does.
Yay.
There's some weird stickers on the front, but yeah.
Uh-oh, that's okay. Yeah, and so my creativity has been in the book, and then also I've taken up painting, and I don't do web series. I show up on them and make disasters. When my husband does a show called Tabletop, and I destroyed the table, but whatever, it's fine. So yeah, I mean we all do different things, and we will answer your variety of questions that you have with this one microphone that works.
Yeah.
I think they were trying to bump up the volume on
So this one just has more volume?
Does this one work?
That's
Kind
the
of?
subtle one.
No, that's subtle.
Yeah. Yeah, this one is.
The subtlest one. Yeah, that one's a loudmouth. Sorry.
Oops. So where
Okay,
should we start?
Are there any questions?
Yeah, anybody, how will people ask a question? Is
We
there
have
a
one
mic?
all the way in the back. You can
Guys.
come up closer, sweetie.
Is there a mic they could come up to ask a question, or do they just need to shout?
I think they need to shout.
The only microphone they can come
Hi.
to is this one.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to get creative with this
Here,
panel
come
about
closer.
trying to communicate.
Hi, what's your name? This is Aurora, everybody.
So Felicia, how did you like being in Eureka?
Oh, good question, and I'm gonna wrap that into something creative. Watch me. Eureka was a really awesome show. I loved being on it. My favorite thing about it was working with Will Wheaton, Anne's husband, because we are really good friends, and we were able to hang out on set a lot. Even though when he eats broccoli, his farts are really smelly.
And his teeth hold all the broccoli.
It's a marvel. Will Wheaton and broccoli, it's like his kryptonite. That's the problem.
Sorry, I don't think you wanted to know that about a 47-year-old man, but whatever.
Listen, and what I loved about Eureka is that I got to play a character who was really creative. She was a scientist, but she was also very much an artist too. And I think a lot of the times people portray science as something that you can't be creative and imaginative. It's all about rules. But really, whoa! Get my voice on. Really, that's when you need to. Science means you need to be requires you to be the most creative. Like science is about thinking of a possibility that isn't possible and then testing it and proving whether it's right or not wrong. So I love the fact that Holly is a really cool character who can be, who she is. She can be kind of girly, quote unquote, but also love science and also be a creative person underneath. So thank you for asking about it.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Aurora. I love it. Okay, we've got one over here. Hi.
Hi. My question is for Anne. With the book, did you submit your ideas? Did you write the book first? Like, how was your transition from I want to do this to this is done?
So I completely self-published. I did ask around, Felicia was one of them, from my author friends who have traditional publishing deals, and one of the things, I think it was after talking to you, about how you give up your rights to it. And so you can write a story, you can get it illustrated, you can take it to a publisher who's like, this is great. So we're going to change the title, we're going to go with a different illustrator and cut out half your story. And I didn't want to do that. So my story is based off of my own experience of an orange tabby cat that followed me home when I was 5. And so that's what the pug character is from. And so I wrote the story. My editor is here. She's actually based in Raleigh, Charlotte Moore. She's at my table with me this whole weekend. But she's not here right now. She went home to take care of her dog. And so I wrote the story, and then I had Charlotte edit. And then in that process was when I was asking my author friends, should I go through traditional publishing or do it on my own? And I decided that because I wanted the book that I would have wanted when I was 5, that for at least the first book, I didn't want anyone to change it. So the difference between self-publishing in the creative part of this that I had to discover was self-publishing and vanity publishing are different. It's still, vanity publishing is when you pay someone to go out and find your editor and find your illustrator or photographer or whatever, find your printer, everything. I found all that on my own. And so the whole process was super stressful and super exciting, and it took me a year and a half from the time I started to the time I got the book in my hands. I found an illustrator on a website called ArtStation, and he's in Ottawa, and I live in Los Angeles, and we did everything online. I've never even talked to him on the phone. I drew. Took a couple months to design the characters and then choose the color palette, and then I had a very specific idea in mind how I wanted everything to look. So I would draw in stick figure form on a dry erase board what I wanted, and then he translated my stick figure drawings into real drawings. So it was a really interesting process, and I created a Piggy and Pug Instagram account. If you scroll back to the beginning, you can see like how I got my ISBN and how I registered the title and finding a printer and all the stuff that I did to make it happen. The other side of self-publishing is you have to promote yourself, and that's really hard. I did hire a publicist to help me, but as hard as it was, I don't think I would have wanted it any other way, because it is 100% what I would have wanted. And no one got to change it because I got to do it myself. So,
I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about, because I'm here because I just started making videos in my garage. And I never knew that I would be super, successful at it. I just wanted to do something that was gratifying after years and years in Hollywood of waiting for someone to tell me that I'm good enough for their creativity. And so that's one of the reasons why I wrote my new book, which is all about finding your own creativity. It's not about like, how do I sell this? How do I make a living at X? It's about how creativity and making something your own is the best thing you can do with your time. And just describing the joy that comes out of your face when you're like, this was really hard. I didn't even know if anybody would read it, but like I made something for myself. And that's really, I think, really important for everybody. I don't know. I mean, you seem to do a lot of things like that are for other people and with other people, but also you do your own stuff. Like, is it different? It's different kind of gratification, right?
See, I got the quiet mic still.
Quiet for that quiet mic.
Well, the thing is, I think I differ from a lot of comic artists. I think they're different kinds. There are people that will do work for other writers and et cetera, and that's their career, and I think that's perfectly awesome, and that's a way to put out your creativity, but I feel like my creative fuel is more limited, and it's special. Not to say theirs isn't, I guess, but that if I'm using any of that fuel, it has to be something that I want to do with like all my heart and soul. So to me, being creative, it has to be something I want to do. I don't really, no offense to y'all, but I don't really do it for you as much as I do it for me. And I think because I do it for me, it's better, and you see that there's there's love in it. It's not like, I want money, and you guys like zombies now, so I'm going to draw zombies.
Good point.
Right?
When our kids were little, we always told them to do what you love. And so as hard as making my book was, the whole time I kept saying, I'm doing this for me, because no matter what you do, if you love it, the people that are going to find it are the ones that like that. You're not going to be able to please everyone, so you have to make sure you are happy with it.
Precisely.
And then that'll find the audience.
Yeah, and I think, this is, I've been immersed in my book about, like, open up your creativity for a year, so I feel really passionate about this, but nobody has a right to make a living at anything. Like, I feel like that is something that people give up because they're doing something for external gratification, or they're wanting to make a career out of it, which means external gratification. So, like, if you can start your creativity from a point of view, like, this is me making something. No one else could make this thing. I have to make it because nobody else will make it. Then, you will have that as fuel in your life. Whether it is your full-time job or your hobby, it is so important to have that in your life, regardless of what it is. And, to me, I took one stand-up class, and I was so terrified. But it was such a lesson in it makes you distill yourself into your own voice. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Well, the one thing I will say that goes with everything you guys are saying is, I know for me being in stand-up comedy, I see a lot of comedians get really bitter at some point in their careers. And I think it's because it is that they've got this end goal in mind of like being super famous and being super rich. And that's not necessarily how the path works out when you're in a creative field, and you really do have to love it. And when you realize, oh yeah, I got into this because it's fun and I like to do it, it really makes you better at it.
It's true. And I also want to point out too, because like I had this sweet little girl come up to my table, and she was talking about this character that she was inventing, and it was like a cat, narwhal, like unicorn. It was like so much stuff. And I was like, that is amazing. I've never heard anything like that. You absolutely must draw that all the time. And I said, no matter what, when you grow up, if you feel like, because even I went through this, because my style, I grew up with manga, And so my style is not what you see on superhero comics. And I used to worry with my Platona book that because the style was so different that people won't like it. And that's where I should have kicked myself in the head and been like, hey, you know what? People are literally refreshed to see something different. And so do what's in your heart and what's different and not what you think people want, because usually it's not what they want. And I know I already said that, but it's such an important statement.
Do you have other questions? We have other questions. Does somebody want to pick somebody?
How about up front, sir?
Hi. Have you ever created something that you loved so much that like you're just like, but then you show it to people and they just...
Oh, so in case you didn't hear that, he said, have you ever created something that you loved so much and then you showed it to other people, and you guys can't see, but he's like, the way he's miming it is almost like a baby. It's like this thing that you love so much and you show it to other people, and maybe they don't like it. They throw the toilet.
You know, I always hear people talk about imposter syndrome, that you, especially when you're about to release a thing, like, oh my God, what if this is terrible? And that happened to me the night before I launched my book last year, and I walked into my husband's office and I'm crying, and I'm like, what if this is terrible? And he's like, it's not terrible. And I had to sit down and read it. I'm like, oh, okay, it's not, because it's what I wanted. And I think what you were talking about, you know, like comedians thinking, I should be more successful or whatever, it's imposter syndrome, but also when you compare yourself to other people, and like, that comparing thing, I think, also hinders a lot of people from actually pursuing doing anything creative, because they think, oh, I'm not good as good as this person, or what if someone doesn't like it or whatever. And it all has to come down to you have to do it because you love it, and the right audience will find it. And you don't always have to do something for an audience. I just started taking painting lessons a few weeks ago. I will never sell those paintings, but I love sitting there and learning like different techniques how to do stuff. I was painting with baby wipes the other day. It was great.
I mean, I have all sorts of chapters. I mean, it's crazy. I've been steeped in this all year. I have chapters on enemies to your creativity, physical and mental. Like there's exercises in the book for people to kind of like take what I'm talking about to do it. And I think at the end of the day, criticism, it's going to hurt, because if you love something, if it doesn't hurt, you don't love it enough. And so also, criticism, you know, it can be destructive only if you let it be destructive. If you can take the emotion out of the immediate emotion that you're going to get when somebody criticizes something you love, and take a step back and be like, well, why is this person saying this? What can I take that's positive out of this? Because everything we make should be flawed, because we are flawed as people. That's part of what makes us weird, and our weirdness is really our superpower when we're a creator, right? Nobody else can make something that weird or flawed just like we made it. And so when we can sort of further define ourselves as a creator, and also have somebody help us point out those weirdnesses and say like, well, how do I make it weird in a different way next time? So you kind of have to take that toxic stuff that dredges up this feeling of imposter syndrome and failure, and like, and you can hear somebody, and when you were 8, say in your ear, oh, you suck, from like, you know, you have all these flashbacks of all the failure in your life culminating in this one thing, if somebody says meh about something you love, right? But you have to sort of like allow yourself to grieve a little bit, and then back up and be like, oh, thanks, I'm going to take what you said, I'm going to make something better next time, you know?
But the other side of that is, I saw somebody say on Twitter just a couple weeks ago, because it turns out there are some positive things that come from Twitter. Imagine that. This woman said, don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't take advice from, which was like, I was like, this needs to be embroidered, a little cross-stitch thing hanging over my door, because we do that. We take in so much negativity all the time, but it doesn't matter. It should only matter, like, you want constructive criticism. You want advice from people that know you, that matter in your life. And if you take on everyone's criticism, like, you'll never do anything, because you'll just feel like, oh, everyone's gonna hate it. So don't listen to those people.
Yeah, not everything you're going to make is going to be a masterpiece, you know. So in my field, there was a famous comedian named Patrice O'Neill, may he rest in peace, and he said something brilliant once about comedians bombing and jokes that bomb. He said that those jokes come from the exact same place as a joke that killed. And the thing is, like, sometimes not everything you create is gonna resonate with other people, and it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with where it came from. You're just gonna come up with ideas that people like and ideas that people aren't gonna like. I mean, Paul McCartney, how many songs has Paul McCartney put out? I mean, Let It Be, Hey Jude. He put out a song recently called, I think it's called Fuck You or something like that, and it's like so bizarre, and you're like, how is this the same person that made Let It Be? But if you look at all of his songs, like some of them are just like kind of clunkers. But I try to kind of think of creative stuff, whether I'm writing something or, doing a joke or whatever. When you're doing something creative, just think of it as like putting flowers in a river and letting them go. That's all.
If they love you, will they come back?
Put them out there. If they come back, yes. Just
back
put them
upriver.
out there. Yeah, you just have to love what you do. It goes back to that.
This woman, you really want this woman on the aisle. You, yes, you.
So I have a question for all of you. Do you prefer to have like a linear structure to your creativity, where you have beginning, middle, and end that you already know is going to be a thing, or do you prefer to go on the fly, like with D&D, where you get a character sheet and you go do your own thing with it?
I definitely fly off the seat of my butt, which I don't know what that means, but they say that. Like sometimes I draw a character for fun, and I was like, oh, I want her to have this hair, and I want to be, kind of sassy, whatever, and then I get to really like her, and then I start thinking like, oh, where did she come from? And so I think for me, especially when I'm writing stories, it's all over the place. I'm like, I know where I want it to end, and I know I want these people in it, but how do they get there? And then I even start thumbnailing before I even know what I'm writing about. It's bananas. But I learned once, because I used to think, oh, I'm doing it wrong. And right, it's the whole idea, like, it's not what everybody else is doing. That's not how they write stories. But then I got that big book by Chris Ware. Does anybody know who Chris Ware is? Oh, what? But this is a comic book convention. I digress. Anyway, Chris Ware is an awesome cartoonist, not a superhero one, but he does like these Acme comics, and they're extremely depressing. But that as an aside, I read a biography about him, and he said that he wrote kind of the same way I wrote because he thought that it mimicked reality in life, and that with life you don't always know what's coming ahead, and things just sort of fall as you go along. And then I felt validated at the end.
I for years I didn't write screenplays because I know that professional screenwriters, they plan everything out very carefully, right? And so I always thought, like, I can't do this because I can't sit there and know everything that's going to happen before I start. And I had to learn that everybody has to get to know who their creator is inside. You have to give them a chance to work in order to see how best they work, right? You can't know just because somebody else, like Anne can write a children's book one way and you could do your thing another way, and there's nothing wrong or right with that. It's just they happen to have found their technique. And any technique that works for you is good technique. And so my method is like, I have a little bit of a loose sketch, and then I get halfway through, and then I cry a lot. And then then I don't know what's going on more, and then I kind of write more, and then I'll go back and rewrite. But that's not what I should be doing, because if you get to the end, you know more about what you can do in the beginning. So I'm a terrible technician, but I can't find joy in sitting there and planning everything out. A lot of people do. But you have to give your creator a chance to work all different ways, and then you'll know what works. And one project might work better another way. And your creator is not dependable. They're not a good boyfriend or girlfriend, okay? They're just not. They're going to be fickle, and they're not going to show up when you want them. They're going to be late. They're going to change their mind. They're going to change their hair. They're going to maybe cheat on you. It's fine. But the point is that you have to allow them the ability to grow up inside of you.
When I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write my story. I sat in front of my computer staring at that blank screen for 15 minutes, and then I walked into my husband's office because he has written a few books, and so I walked in and I was like, how do I start? And he said, just write everything, and then eventually you'll, just write all your ideas, and eventually you'll find the story because you have to narrow it down. So my story was huge, and Piggy and Pug went on so many adventures, and then I eventually narrowed down exactly what I wanted the message to be. And so it was kind of doing a little bit of everything. But it was weird because, as a hairdresser for 17 years, like someone had an idea and I had to do that idea. So there was really not a lot of wiggle room there. And so I had something very specific in mind by the time I finished the story, like how I wanted it to look, but getting there was weird. And then now that I'm taking painting classes where I think Bob Ross said it best, where he said there are no mistakes, there are only happy accidents. But that's what's cool is this instructor, she says things to me each week where I'm like, that is the best thing ever, because she says you can't mess this up because it's what you want it to be. Whether you paint a sunset or whatever, you want the sky to be completely yellow. Like if you want it to be exact, you take a picture. Otherwise, it's your own interpretation of what you want it to be. So it doesn't have to be perfect, because the imperfections are sometimes what makes it so great. So I like that I've kind of experienced a lot of it, and the painting has taken me out of my comfort zone, because I'm like, no, it has to look exactly like this. And she's like, no, we're going to put purple shadows on your mountains. And I did that, and I was like, whoa, it looks really good, and it's freaking me out. But it's cool. It's cool to do that. And I think that painting is a cool thing to just experiment with, because it forces you to not be perfect, and it's really fun. I like it.
Can I play moderator and ask you guys a question?
Sure.
Because this might be my only chance that I get to ask these wonderful ladies questions. Because it's also a very important part of creativity that we don't always talk about, but I think it's important, and it's when you feel like you're going to give up. And you're crying, and you're saying, I can't do it, and you hit this wall, and so you just feel like you're the worst in the world. And I know what I do about it, which is cry, distract myself with video games, cry more, sleep a lot, eat a lot, and then I get back on the horse. But I want to know what you do when you hit that. And it would make me feel super cool and super better to know that you guys feel that way too sometimes.
Well, for me, so I released this book in spring of last year, and I was like in the middle of promoting it, and I had to completely walk away from all of it because I had surprise black mold in the walls in my kitchen. And we had to move out for 8 weeks, and then we had just a lot of stuff with our family going on. And when you get stressed, well, at least for me, the first thing that goes, creativity. Because I thought, now I have this like forced vacation, and I will write my next book. And I sat there, I wrote 4 paragraphs in July of last year. They're great 4 paragraphs, but I lost all my creativity, and that's why I started painting again, because that's what kicked in my creativity. You guys were filming the 4th season of Tabletop, and I was like, I don't have anything for myself. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, he comes home, like here you guys are filming this show where he's playing games all day, every day, 5 days a week. And he comes home and he says, I think I'm going to have some friends over this weekend for game day. I am putting laundry soap in the thing, and I'm just like, I don't have anything for myself. And he's like, what's happening? He had no idea. Because I didn't want to be like, I feel like I don't know how to be creative right now, and I feel like trapped in myself, and I can't figure it out. And I had 2 people in 1 week tell me, you should go on this retreat at a place called Esalen. And so I was like, okay, cool. I went, and they had this like weekend retreat thing where you could just like be there and go on hikes and sit in the hot springs or whatever. And there was a workshop there called the Painting Experience. And I was like, I've always wanted to learn how to paint. And it wasn't learning how to paint. It was literally everyone's in a yurt, nobody is talking, and it is paint your feelings. And I was like, what's up, blank page? But then the whole week, I started painting things that I didn't realize were emotionally holding me back, preventing me from being creative. And so it's funny because I got there, and I get myself in my cabin, and I go out, and I'm looking out at the ocean. It's in Big Sur, and I'm like, why do I know this place? And then I realized it's the last episode of Mad Men when Don Draper loses his mind, just keeps driving, and he ends up at this retreat where then I hope it's not spoilers, it's been a few years, where he thinks of the great Coca-Cola campaign. And that was the, what was it? Teach the World to Sing or something like that. And so I was just like, oh my God, I'm having my Don Draper moment where I left on Mother's Day. I have children. I left on Mother's Day and went to do this. And it was just the coolest thing to be there where I just was like painting about, I don't know, like old crap that my ex-husband put us through and just all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, like at the end, I'm painting sunflowers and whatever. And that drive home was when I was like, I'm going to write this book. I want to learn, I want to do other painting. Like kicked in my creative brain. And sometimes, like if you're crying and playing video games and eating and whatever, like sometimes I feel like just taking a walk also, and completely removing yourself. I had to physically remove myself and drive 5 hours up to Big Sur. But you could do it in your own home or your own neighborhood. But just like, I don't know, I think that's why I started these painting classes again recently, because I was like, I have all this crap that is like stuck in me, and I need to find a way to tap into my creativity. And I feel like eventually it will lead to me writing another book. But right now, I'm just enjoying that letting go, and because it is like a meditation. I sit there for 2 hours a day in that class, and I'm like, oh yes, I will paint with this tiny little makeup sponge, and then I will use a Kleenex to make tree leaves, and I love it.
You
but
just
it's
have
cool.
to, I think, like creativity, it's a muscle, and whatever you're doing with it, it just needs to stretch its legs. And I think, I mean, a lot. I think about quitting a lot, but mostly it's because I just want to quit the business of my creativity versus like the creativity of it. Because if you're in the business of creativity, like I am, I need to support my family on my writing and my acting and things like that. You're constantly thinking of how to be approved of, and therefore you can't be truly creative. Even if you sell that script, you're collaborating and compromising that vision, which is fine. That's the business of creativity. But your creativity has to be constantly flowing in and out of you, despite that business of it. And so for me, I always just try to just suck.
Do you feel like
I just literally am deliberate, and I write about this a lot in my book. Like I just literally am crappy as possible. Like I'm like, you can't be crappy enough. Write the crappiest 10. You have to write 20 pages in 30 minutes, and I'm like, I can't. Blah. Like literally, there will not be any real words there. But like me challenging myself to be as bad as possible, eventually I get to the point where I can write something that makes me have fun, because being a smartass is always fun, right?
That's such an interesting idea. I've never even thought of like, just draw horribly.
No,
like
but it's a contest.
Because like when I was doing like Plutona and I had deadlines, and that's like I worked a part-time job at a bar, and I remember before opening that one time I brought my work to work because I'm that bartender, and I just remember one time when there was no one in the bar, and I just flopped down and I screamed, and I was just like, I can't do it. Why am I in this career?
I bet
I'm
that
the
felt
worst.
great to
I
do,
don't
though.
deserve it. And so to think like, I should have just took a piece of paper and just been like,
No, that's what I did.
like just draw crap.
That's the only way I got through
And be
both
like,
of my books. Yeah.
I know I can draw better than that.
No, and I put it in the book because I'm like, well, other people can learn from my just like vomiting onto the page. Like
That's amazing.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, it's the only thing that really gets me over that hump, because I'm a perfectionist and I always want things to be perfect. I'm always thinking 10 steps ahead, when in creativity you should only think one. And so when you start to zoom out, like you're like Google mapping it, you're like, whoa, look at that whole, oh my
there's
God.
that Earth view. Oh
Yeah,
my
the
God,
Earth
it's too
view. No,
much.
you need to get on Street View, man, and like shovel some trash.
Is it weird? Because like for me, my creativity is at my own pace. So do you feel a certain type of pressure because you have, well, because you're talking about supporting your family. But do you, like with having deadlines and stuff, like the idea of a deadline on creativity freaks me out.
No, it's terrible.
Yeah, because it's like you're forcing your creativity.
There's nothing
so how
like
do
a
you-
nice black cloud of a date hovering over your head constantly. And then when you're like, I gotta eat food, or I would like to play a little game, and then you're just like, this black cloud is, what are you doing? Why are you sleeping? Why? You have this date is
But to
coming.
me, the best thing that I ever did was to take stand-up comedy. And like you can maybe talk about this, because I took a class, and you constantly, the best thing you do as a stand-up comic and as a creator is to carry a notebook around with you and write down anything weird that you see or think of. Because if you collect your thoughts, you will accumulate to something. And that really taught me that we are always creative. We just don't really give ourselves credit. And it was stand-up comedy because you're really trying to put bits together. and
It is
you're
true.
constantly
It
aware.
can strike at any time. And what you said is exactly true about there is a difference between being creative, but then being creative for money, and you just kind of have to remember that if you're actually doing it to make money, which is really nice because it's nice to pay bills, and why not do it with something you like, that you do have to delineate it a little bit in your head and go, okay, this, I actually do have a deadline for this. But like as far as like creative blocks, I kind of do the same thing, that kind of a combo of what like you guys said. I'm sure you've heard of the book The Artist's Way, but there's a classic thing in The Artist's Way called morning pages. And morning pages is perfect for writer's block or any kind of creative block. And what you do is you take 3 pieces of paper. Okay, it can be in a notebook. Maybe you keep a notebook of your morning pages. And you take a pen or a pencil and you just start writing until you fill those 3 pages. Don't stop to think. Don't try to be funny or try to be anything. It's just a stream of consciousness. You're not doing it for any goal other than to keep your hand moving the whole time. And then it's crazy what you end up writing. There's actually a lot of times really good ideas in there because you're not trying to force it. There isn't any reason you're doing it other than to kind of loosen up the ideas a little bit. So
My husband has a dry erase board. Actually, it's not a board. Like, you can get a dry erase stick thing. It's like a big adhesive thing he has across his closet door. And every time he has a story idea, he just writes it. And he doesn't write the whole story. He writes the little idea. So there'll be, I went in there the other day, there was something about a zombie, but then there was also another story idea about a haunted knife, and then there was something, it was all these random things, but he puts it up there just
don't give my ideas away.
Yeah, so the ideas are there, and so when he's done with one project, he will sit there and think about the next, that story, that idea is there, and then he can make a whole story out of it later.
Yeah, you got to collect yourself. You are worth collecting. Everything you think is worth collecting. So make an effort, because you'll never have that thought again. You'll never remember it.
You think you're going to remember it.
Nope,
That's
you
the
don't.
funny thing. You
It's
never do.
kinda like your keys.
No.
You do not remember those,
Never
where you
do.
put them, or your
Jot
phone.
it down.
Question? Another question? All right. Ann, you want to pick up?
Here, come here. Come here. What's your name?
Vian,
Hi. What's your question?
my question is for Felicia. How did you go from making videos in your garage to where you are now? How did you get it out there?
How did I do that?
I want to know too.
I mean,
I've been in that garage. I think you still make videos in there.
I don't make as many, but yeah. I mean, listen, it was a right time at the right place with the right project. I cannot promise anybody that success that I was able to do, because I was just early in the world. But fundamentally, I told a story that I needed the world to hear, that was personal to me, and that only I could tell.
Was that the Guild?
The Guild, yeah. I wanted, as an actor, I had spent many years waiting for someone to discover me, and no one's rescuing you, okay? Bottom line, I got rejected 4 times this week for things I wanted that should have been, you'd think, oh, I earned that. I deserve it. You don't deserve anything. You didn't earn anything. You're not entitled to anything. And if you go into life like that, you can weather any setback. It's like, I'm kind of obsessed with Stoic philosophy right now, and it's a little bit of a downer, but still, it allows you to weather that kind of stuff, because
Felicia Day, keeping it real.
Keeping it real. I mean, if you're practical about it, then you're just like, okay, I got to get up and keep moving. And so I wrote a script because my friends encouraged me to write a script that was personal to me about who I am and featuring me as an actress in a way that nobody would let me be. And so that's why I think my stuff was successful at the time. There were a lot of external reasons. I've talked about a lot, but fundamentally, if you are writing something that is personal, that only you can do, and something that you love, and you want other people to understand about you and your experience in this life, you'll never go wrong, because then you'll know that whatever happens, success, that you can't control other people liking your work. You can, or your success, because that's all that kind of external success. Your inner success is what you need to achieve, and that's by telling something, creating something that no one else can.
Here,
create.
here. Yes. Well said.
No question?
Yeah. How about up here? Hi.
Aside from deadlines, how do you know when you're done with a project? How do you not wake up the next day and say, oh man, I could just change this little thing? Or
Funny story. The Cthulhu Louise book that I did, I thought I was done. And then like the first 5 pages went into previews, and it was like on all the comic sites, and I realized that I forgot to ink a foot. And I was like, oh, I wasn't done. So I guess the answer is you don't always know. But in the more literal sense that you're talking about, I guess, is for me, the project's complete when I finish the last page. I know that's really boring, I guess. From a comic book standpoint.
Doing things in print is definitely, there's a finality to it. That was one of the things that like my painting instructor was talking about is if you keep looking at it, you're always going to want to change things. And so she was like, one of the things she said was step back and look at it, and like you don't have to nitpick. Like it can just be what it is. If it's simple, whatever, it doesn't have to be this complex thing. But it's funny because I was doing a painting on Wednesday that has a bridge in it, and the bridge is a little off center. I did not sleep that night because I wanted to go back and fix that bridge. But and I probably will, and it's fine. But I think that there's a fine line between, especially when you're doing things that are in print. And what's funny is that I think every book, this is my paranoia because my book is so small and kids catch everything. My biggest fear was a typo. And so I probably read it 40 different times. I had several different people read it ahead of time. I had an editor still when it came from the printer. Nobody could talk until I went through and made sure there was no typos. But even like Neil Gaiman has typos in his book, and like it happens, and that's one of those things of it's going to be imperfect, and it's still okay.
Fine. I mean, as far as creativity goes, like you can take it from my cold dead hands. Like I'll never, and that's why you kind of have you have to have external benchmarks. I mean, even if it's your spouse or your friend who's keeping you accountable, and like we have until X day to finish this thing, and you can have one rewrite, and you have to show up. That's why deadlines work. Like for my creativity book, I did like a 40-page proposal, and it took me like 8 months to, write, and then I've been rewriting. I was writing on the plane coming here, a third editing pass where I was still finding things, and they were like, Felicia, you can't rewrite. I was like, what? The tense on this is not correct, and the spacing on this page, that unicorn needs to be bigger. They're like, you need to stop. So at a certain point, you kind of have to have that external person to be like, you know what? I think you should let go and move on, because you're never going to get better working on the same thing forever.
That's true.
But I also think that people don't know. Like if you wanted to change something, like maybe people didn't even catch that foot. But what would have been cool is when it was in print. Then when it went through print, then anytime someone came to have you sign the book, you'd be like, I'm just going to go in and finish this foot really quick.
I will say that someone, because it was through Dark Horse, someone in Dark Horse, think whomever did it, did fill in the foot themselves for the actual issue. So it was really just the pages that came out as the preview pages. But also, I for like when you think something's done, I will admit that it always feels like it's never done.
Well, if you're George Lucas, you just go back and keep adding CGI.
But I feel like you have to
just
accept the flaws, because there's always going to be flaws. Nothing is going to be 100%
Except that last season of Game of Thrones. They just have to redo.
Yeah.
Well, I know we can go on forever and ever on this topic, but this actually we've reached the time limit of our panel.
Oh, wow.
So what we'll do is we'll just go down the line, and we'll just each plug whatever we're going to plug. And, of course, we all have booths, so you can come and see any of us at booths. And for me...
I thought she said boo.
Boobs.
Oh, no, we all
come
booze.
see
You
my
know there's a
booth.
bar in here somewhere.
I'm an artist. We're negative people.
You want to be my boo?
Oh, I thought you said booze. And I was like, oh, there's a bar in here.
Booze, boobs, and boo.
Yeah, this is very telling
This is a
about all our
terrible
personalities.
telephone
Self-deprecation.
So we have tables on the floor that you might want to
Anyway.
Come see us. Where can people find your stuff?
I'm also doing stand-up comedy today at 6:45 in the Comedy Room 402. There's a show tomorrow as well, so come and find me, and we'll just go down the line. Emmy?
Okay, my booth is, I don't know the number, but it's row 500, and it's right across from Anne.
I'm in 537, and she's across right there. So
I have cat
You can get both
pins,
their
I got
books
prints,
there.
I got books.
Oh, great. You can pre-order my book, FeliciaDayBook.com. I have these handy postcards if you want to come by my booth to get one. Your pre-orders are appreciated. It comes out October 1st. And I have other of my memoir books as well. If you'd like to get any of those, I have them at the booth.
And where is your booth?
No idea. I haven't been there. Haven't been there.
Excellent.
Oh, they'll find you. Don't worry.
It's somewhere
next to
across from
David Tennant.
537, which is mine, and she's down and around it. Yeah.
I'm next to Will. I'm in the perfect sandwich, Will and David Tennant.
What? You know what's funny is Wednesday night, I told Will, David Tennant's going to be there this weekend, right? And he's all, what? And what's crazy is I have seen all of Good Omens, and he hasn't seen it yet. I know. And so I'm like, no, dude, you have to watch Good Omens. And he's like, I don't want to watch it yet. I want to wait till I come back because he wants to savor it all. I didn't want to rush through.
All right. He's dumb. Okay,
Yeah.
bye.
Okay, whatever.
Thank you, everybody.